Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. Excuse me. Sorry, I apologize. My allergies are really getting to me today. So hopefully everyone can bear with me. So we are going to talk about the end of Scarlet Letter. Congratulations, you guys got through it. And these last few chapters are a lot more interesting because we start to see Hawthorne build up the suspense, right? Which a lot of that element of Gothic literature we haven't really seen in his writing until now. Okay, at least till this section of the novel, right? Each chapter he starts to build. So that's where we see that element of Gothic literature in Nathaniel Hawthorne. So I'm going to pull up my PowerPoint notes. Let's see, there they are. And we're going to talk a little bit about this, okay? I'm going to try to keep this a lot more brief than the last couple of chapters, but especially chapter 19, The Child at the Brookside, we see a lot more about Dimmesdale's character, right? So first off, Dimmesdale tells Hester earlier on that his biggest concern is that Pearl isn't going to love him. Meanwhile, he tells Hester that his biggest concern has been that somebody is actually going to realize that he is Pearl's father, okay? So here's my soapbox moment. And I apologize. There's a lot of soapbox moments if you haven't been able to tell about Dimmesdale. Okay, so poor Pearl has been ostracized from society her whole entire life. She's been a bastard child. And this is something that Dimmesdale easily could have fixed if he just admitted to the sin that him and Hester committed, right? But instead, he puts his pride on the pinnacle instead. Okay, that is his main priority. So for him to be worried that Pearl isn't going to love him, could you blame her? Because the fact that she becomes so much more forgiving at the end is really quite unbelievable and admirable of her character. Poor Dimmesdale is so concerned. Okay, again, that's my little soapbox moment about Dimmesdale. Don't worry, there are plenty more. So Hester tries to coax Pearl over the brook, right? But Brooke is really Pearl is really recalcitrant and will not go near Hester. Sorry. And Dimmesdale drops this very interesting idea about the brook, right? That the brook is something that separates two worlds, okay? And that Pearl is in this like whimsical, elfish, untouchable world, this world of fantasy, whereas Hester and Dimmesdale are on the other side. But again, this is very interesting too, because last time we talked to Hester and Dimmesdale, this is a very surreal thing that's happening to them, which could be kind of fantastical in a way. So it's interesting to think, is it Pearl that's on this fantastical, whimsical side, or is it really Hester and Dimmesdale? So Hester becomes really threatening to Pearl, right? And first she's really lovey-dovey, trying to coax her over, kind of like what you do with a puppy. And then she starts to get a little bit more threatening, and Pearl goes off the chain, right? And Dimmesdale, who was so concerned that Pearl wasn't going to love him, is like, please make her quiet. She's hurting my head. Oh my gosh, right? I mean, seriously, Dimmesdale, get a grip. So poor Hester is trying to calm her down, and she realizes that the reason that Pearl won't come over the brook is because Hester's removed the A. And Pearl has seen Hester with that A her entire life. And she also has this idea that that A is supposed to be there for a reason and that somehow she might be attached to the A. So Hester kind of, surrenders to Pearl. She has Pearl grab the A, and Pearl hands it back to Hester. Hester pins it back on, and then all's right in the world with Pearl, until Hester tries to introduce her to Dimmesdale. And this cute, sweet, affectionate little Pearl that we saw on the scaffold, that we saw at Governor Bellingham's, is pretty gone. And we don't know if that's just because she's jealous of the new situation or if she just seriously sees through Dimmesdale. One of the questions that I posit in this slide is why might Pearl's actions be symbolic about the letter? Okay, that's something that you can think about if that's a question you want to answer on the discussion board. Sorry. The other one, how might Pearl be a symbol for Hester and Dimmesdale? How does she enhance the dichotomy between them? So that's another thing to think about. So again, the end of the chapter, Dimmesdale does kiss Pearl on the forehead, and Pearl runs to the brook, right? And she's like trying to scrub it off, right? She doesn't want anything to do with Dimmesdale right now. who can blame her? So then she kind of goes and she watches from the side as Dimmesdale and Hester continue their conversation, okay, about going to Europe and all that stuff. So then we have Dimmesdale in a maze. And this is a little bit interesting too, right? We start to see how his perspective changes. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out my video. And they decide, Hester and him decide to run away to the old world, okay, instead of staying in the new world. One of the reasons is the only place they'd be able to live is in the wilderness, and Dimmesdale's health is just not going to be able to keep up with those demands. So here's another question for you. Sorry. How is this old world versus new world symbolic? Okay, so again, they're leaving the new world to go back to the old world. Okay, what might that be symbolic of? Something to think about. So they decided they're going to leave after the governor's inauguration because Dimmesdale has to speak at it. So for Dimmesdale, this is like his last opportunity for his crowning glory. Like, it is always about Dimmesdale. That's so aggravating. I'm sorry, I find this so ridiculously aggravating. So Dimmesdale leaves the woods and he starts to feel a little bit more evil as he's coming into town. So we see this kind of similarity between him and young Goodman Brown. And he starts to get overwhelmed with this surreal sort of feeling, right? He's coming into the town and it doesn't quite seem real to him. But also think him coming back from the forest and feeling more evil, how does that connect to Puritan beliefs? So Dimmesdale's tempted to do some pretty terrible stuff that definitely would not coincide with being a minister, right? And he's faced with like at least 4 different temptations. One of them is speaking blasphemy to the deacon. Then he says that he wants to corrupt a young maiden, right? She's trying to be so sweet to Dimmesdale, and he just kind of like brushes her off and she cries, and he kind of thinks it's funny. He wants to teach a child curse words as the child's learning his catechism. And then he also wants to tell an older woman that there is no immortal soul. So even here, Hawthorne, to the people in Hawthorne's time, this would have been very satirical, okay? And if you really take the time to sit and think about it, it gets kind of funny. Like, in a very dark way, it's kind of funny. So then he starts to debate whether his mind is just going or if he actually did make a deal with the devil by telling Hester that they'd run away together. Okay, not so much in the way that like Hester's the devil, but just the fact that that's kind of a sinful thing to be doing. He also ends up conversing with Mistress Hibbins, right? And Hibbins calls him out. She knows where he's been. And he kind of thinks about it, but he does deny that he was ever there. But Hibbins sees right through him. Sorry, excuse me. So when he returns to his study, Chillingworth sees him. He notices this paleness about him, and he offers to help him, and Dimmesdale declines, right? And that's when Chillingworth knows that Dimmesdale knows, okay, no longer trusts him. Okay, the New England holiday. So this is a completely different setting for Pearl when she comes to see the town in New England holiday. And there's so many different people that are coming for the New England holiday. There are people out of town. There are people that were sailors. The Indians are there. Okay, there are a ton of different people. And our Pearl asks an interesting question to Hester about Dimmesdale, because she says, you know, I can't put my hand on it. Like, one minute he is holding my hand at the scaffold, but then he kind of ignores us in public, and he keeps putting his hand on his heart. Like, he's such a sad man. And she very innocently identifies the hypocrisy that Dimmesdale's representing. Hawthorne also takes the time to illustrate people within society and notes the town beetle. Okay, so he starts to talk about how fantastical this holiday is, right? People are getting excited, there's this huge crowd, but there's still some elements of Puritan culture that are residing in this holiday. Okay, it's not like they're wearing their best, you know, cocktail dress or anything. It's still kind of gray, it's still kind of drab. And you have this town beetle that's kind of overseeing all of this. So again, I want you to think what that might be symbolic of, because he actually does serve as a major symbol within the text. So as I said earlier, the town consists of a bunch of different people here, okay? In fact, some strangers that are coming from outside of town have heard of Hester's Eye, and they finally get to see it firsthand, and they start kind of talking about that letter, which kind of sucks for Hester, right? Because she's finally gotten over that persona, and then these people have heard like the legend of it and they're talking about her again. So it's like it's something that she just can't get away from. Meanwhile, there are these buccaneers. Okay, so back then, a buccaneer, in case you don't know, was someone that would looted, they would kill, and they come into town like they're just kind of an everyday citizen. And the thing that really sucks about that is that if those buccaneers wanted to just stay in the new world and start a life, their old life would be let go of because that was something that happened in the seas and nobody needs to know about it. But for Hester, she has this sin that's honestly not nearly as bad as stealing and killing. And she has this cross to bear the rest of her life. So, again, something to think about. So, despite Hester being accepted into society, people still avoid being near her. So, she's starting to see just how much that A is still part of her life. Okay. She keeps trying to transcend. She seems to transcend, but people's habits still stand in the way. Okay. So first she's being kind of gossiped about by these strangers, but then the people within the town don't even go near her. And then the captain of the ship tells Hester that Chillingworth is going to be accompanying Dimmesdale on their voyage. I think I meant to put that on the other slide. I don't think that actually happens in this chapter, so I apologize. Got tired last night. I apologize. Once again, Dimmesdale's persona changes, okay, in chapter 22, the procession. But this time, his persona is much more invigorated, right? He is enthusiastic, okay, he's more energetic. People are like, oh my gosh, our Dimmesdale is back, right? They're getting kind of excited. But as Hester's watching this, she starts to notice this huge chasm between her and Dimmesdale, okay? And he's like majestically marching through the square. He doesn't even acknowledge Hester, okay? And she starts to like second guess their bond, okay? And she starts to even think that maybe everything that happened in the woods was a complete delusion. Pearl hardly recognizes Dimmesdale, right? And she tells Hester that she was really tempted to run up and give him a kiss, but she refrained herself because she didn't recognize who it was. And then Hester kind of admonishes Pearl and says, oh, don't you worry, he would have said that it wasn't an appropriate time to be having a kiss in the square. So you don't know if there's this underlying annoyance with Hester or if she really does believe that Pearl shouldn't have run up to Dimmesdale. So, as I said, all these other people are kind of ostracizing Hester again, except Mistress Hibbins. So, Mistress Hibbins comes up to Hester and essentially reveals that she knows there's a relationship between Dimmesdale and Hester, which Hester readily denies, right? She's been doing this for 7 years. She's not going to throw the towel in now and stop admitting that she won't reveal who Pearl's father is. So, however, Hibbins still kind of like digs at Hester, and Hester doesn't think she's evil. Okay, all the townspeople think Hibbins is evil. Okay, meanwhile, Hester just thinks she's insane. And maybe that's because of the stuff that she's had to go through with her A. We don't really know, but she's much more open to Hibbins than really anybody else in the town. Meanwhile, Pearl starts asking her questions about the black man, and Hibbins says that Pearl is the son of the air, meaning she's the son of the devil. Okay, and Pearl kind of laughs at this and runs away because that's just part of her little flighty nature. Let's see. Oh, my little irony alert. Okay, so guess where Dimmesdale is giving his grand speech. The scaffold. Isn't that a little bit ironic? I think so too. But it's going to be interesting to see how this scaffold starts to develop into a symbol. Okay, I was going to leave that as a question for you guys to answer on the discussion board, but I think I'm just going to give that to you when we get there. The other thing that's very interesting about the scaffold is that it is called an edifice again. All right, and we see Hawthorne use this word a lot. Okay, he uses it to describe the jailhouse. He describes it at one point to describe the letter. Okay, so it's kind of interesting to see this fall under the term edifice as well. Okay, also, spoiler alert, all three of those things are symbols for the novel. As Hester listens to Dimmesdale, she mentions that his voice is very musical. Okay, meanwhile, Pearl is flying all around the square, right? And all these people are absolutely enthralled by her, right? There's something about Pearl and her bubbly personality that people are very drawn to. And this captain of the ship tries to catch her, but he can't. Okay, she's like this little elf. And he's finally kind of laughs and he goes, hey, I need you to give a message to your mom that this old hunchback fellow is going to be accompanying Dimmesdale. All right. And Pearl runs away and relays the message to Hester. And Hester, there's this quote, steadfastly enduring spirit almost sank. Okay. And I think that's such a powerful way of describing Hester. But I want you to think too, what does this tell us about Hester's personality? Okay. What do those words really mean? What is Hawthorne trying to illustrate about Hester? So at the end of the chapter, we see Hawthorne building up his suspense. Okay, as I said, this is the element of Gothic literature that we finally start to see with Hawthorne. Although we see it a little bit in the forest too. Okay, he's just not as what's the word I'm looking for? A lot of you notice that Poe is very outgoing with his elements of Gothic literature. Hawthorne's just not like that. So people start to digress to their old habits of judging. Okay, though less severe towards Hester. Excuse me. And then at the very end of the chapter, Hawthorne leaves us with a very profound remark. The sainted minister in the church, the woman of the scarlet letter in the marketplace, what imagination would have been irreverent enough to surmise that the same scorching stigma was in them both? So first, isn't that an awesome way to use alliteration? But also, what dichotomy is Hawthorne trying to illustrate here? Okay, so this is another good opportunity for a discussion board question. Chapter 23, we have the revelation of the Scarlet Letter. So Dimmesdale has the utmost attention and respect from his congregation. Okay, and the subject of his sermon is the individual's relationship with God. Since this is occurring on the scaffold, what might the scaffold represent? Okay, so as I said, I was going to let you guys answer that on the discussion board, but I think it might help with me or help me kind of guide you guys through it. So I want you to think of it this way. This is where Hester stood and basically had to deal with the repercussions of her sin, okay? And after she went through all of that, she actually lived a better life than Dimmesdale, who kept his secrets hidden, right? So we start to see the scaffold as this place of redemption, okay? So once Dimmesdale starts to close the sermon, his energy and his inspiration start to completely drain, right? John Wilson gives him an arm to help him, but he waves it away. Governor Bellingham looks at him as if he needs to go help, and Dimmesdale also kind of shoos him off, okay? But he ends up calling Hester and Pearl back onto the scaffold, and this is when he finally tells the congregation about his sin. And it's very eloquent the way he does. It's very powerful. But then the dude passes out and is on the verge of dying, okay? Again, I find this a little bit aggravating. I will get to that in a moment. But as he's dying, okay, well, first off, let me rewind a second. I got a little bit annoyed and excited. So when he confesses, he tears open his shirt, right? He totally hulks out, right, and to expose the A that's ingrained on his chest. And while this is all happening, Chillingworth is trying to shoulder through the crowd, trying to keep him from doing this, okay? Think about why that is. Chillingworth, if Dimmesdale dies, Chillingworth has nothing left to live for anymore. Okay, he has basically created his whole life around getting revenge on Dimmesdale. So after he exposes the A on his chest, he passes out on the scaffold, right? He falls down, he's on the verge of dying. Another cop out for Dimmesdale, just saying. And let's see, sorry, I got lost. Yeah, so Chillingworth again is overwhelmed, right? He says that Dimmesdale has escaped him because he's dedicated his whole life to getting revenge for him. And then as Dimmesdale's dying, this is pretty sweet. He does ask Pearl for a kiss, right? And Pearl kisses him, and it's almost like this spell is broken for Pearl, right? She finally has a father. She's no longer ostracized from society, because she finally belongs, which is kind of cute. Like, a way to go, Hawthorne. That's awesome. Okay, tearjerker, need a box of tissues, Hallmark card, whatever. Meanwhile, this is where we see the opposite end of the spectrum. Hester is left holding the bag. Like, you really can't help but feel bad for poor Hester. I mean, hasn't the poor girl gone through enough? And she just wants something, something to hold on to from Dimmesdale. I mean, this poor woman has kept his identity secret for 7 flippin' years, while her child has had to also undergo the same repercussions as Hester, which is completely unfair. Okay, and she asks, "Will we meet again?" And once again, Dimmesdale just completely cops out, saying, "Oh well, it's going to be on God, and He's merciful, but it's going to be on Judgment Day." Like, come on, Dimmesdale, throw the girl a poor or bone for the love of goodness. But whatever. So he ends up saying that it's going to be up to God. And then he also says that God has shown him mercy by him having to deal with Chillingworth and also having to have this weight of guilt on his shoulders. Okay, that he's learned important lessons from it. Meanwhile, it seems like a really long time to learn a lesson to me personally. Frankly, I think he should have learned it a little bit sooner, but that's just me. Also, I think it's pretty easy to say these things as you're on the verge of dying and about to see your judgment day. But again, that's just me. So ultimately, one thing that I think is kind of interesting to think about is Dimmesdale's sin worse than Hester's? Ultimately, who has the worst sin, Dimmesdale, Hester, or Chillingworth? So that's another really interesting question to kind of think about for our discussion board, okay? And say why. All right, so we're almost done. We have the conclusion. So there are all these different rumors circulating about Dimmesdale's A, right? That he started practicing a penance once Hester had to start hers, that once Chillingworth appeared, suddenly the A appeared, that his inner guilt was trying to eat out of his chest. And then some people deny seeing it at all, right? People are like, didn't happen, didn't happen. Okay, it happened. So a year after Dimmesdale dies, Chillingworth dies. Okay, again, Chillingworth has nothing to live for. He has let revenge consume him so much that there is nothing else for him to do in his life. Okay. However, what's kind of interesting is he leaves all of his inheritance to Pearl. Okay, so shortly after Chillingworth dies, Pearl and Hester disappear. Nobody knows where they've gone. Okay, but one day these boys are playing outside of Hester's cabin and they see this old woman near the cabin, and everybody believes it's Hester. And nobody really knows what happens to Pearl. Some people say that maybe they went to England and that Pearl drowned on the ship, but Hester spends a lot of her time making beautiful baby gowns. Okay, so maybe too Pearl found her hubby, right, and stayed somewhere with and is having her own children. Okay, but Hester again still feels drawn to stay in the new world, okay, because that is where her sin was, and she feels like she just needs to serve out her penance at that place, which is kind of interesting. We see this responsibility attached to Hester. And what's even better, she starts to be a person that people go for counsel. Okay, she actually does finally have respect within the town, and people are in awe of her, which is something that she really hadn't had for a very long time. Then, obviously, Hester eventually dies, and she is buried between Dimmesdale, okay, 6 feet of space apart. Funny, right? Okay, and they share this tombstone. And that is pretty much the end of Scarlet Letter. Okay, so another potential another discussion board question. What do you guys think about the ending? Okay, does this suffice? Did you not like it? Okay, tell me why. All right, so for your assignment, you are going to listen to the lecture and then answer one of my questions on the discussion board. Okay, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about your quiz tomorrow on our Zoom meeting. All right, have a good one, guys.